education is about transformation, and some of that transformation can be relatively easy and can be fun, but ultimately a transformation like the birth is a massive transformation. There is a pain associated with that, and I don't think we can take that away. And I agree. I mean, it is really exciting the way that this generation coming through are networking and creating online communities and everything like that, and it'll no doubt generate its own experiences and pains. But I think we're kidding ourselves if we think we can just make it so much fun that that's all there is to the process. That life is a workshop, and there is a.
Okay, so this is great. Now, I listened to an NPR story a while back in which he said that families that have lots of siblings who really torment each other heavily are much tighter. And the families where they're kind of a boy and a girl and they're distant in their own rooms and whatever, when they get older, they just drift apart. But the ones who like tied each other up and sent each other down on the skateboard, and tied to a chair and all that, they're very close as they grow older.
I'll tell my brother that, so he'll
Exactly. Does anyone mind if I tape, by the way? Does anyone mind if I put it on Google Video? Because this is part of what I'm interested in.
I think it seems that I listened closely to what our Australian friend Mr. Briesen said just before lunch. And he talked a lot about instant messaging and all this technology that's apparently tying young people together. We do graduate surveys at my college, and without exception, the feedback we get from employers says to us that our graduates are equipped technically and in their chosen discipline. But what they don't necessarily do in the workplace is work together well in teams. They don't necessarily communicate well with one another and with management. So they seem to be missing these social skills that seem, at least to me, to be counterintuitive to all this dependence upon technology. So while we might be producing graduates and students who are technologically savvy and skilled, we may not be producing graduates who can work well in a team of other employees toward accomplishing some project or task. So I don't know, that seems to be what the data says. We're a bit concerned about it at my college. And I think there may be occasions when one could use technology, but one for other reasons would choose not to use it in an effort to build these relationship and social skills.
And so we tied back to the birthing process, but I'd like to get your feedback to that thought.
Talking about developing social skills and using technology, Dia mentioned at the beginning of this MMORPGs, massive multiplayer online role-playing games. Anybody ever heard of WoW, World of Warcraft? Anybody here play it? So tell me what server you're on and you can be a part of our guild. But this online game has 6.5 million players in the world. And there are so many social things that you learn in this game. It has its own economy. You learn how to save your money to buy certain items. You group with people and you're part of a guild and you learn these social skills. There's a guild leader. You have to learn to work with this manager in order to do the things in this game. So I don't know how that really relates to education, but I think there's technological things out there that are teaching these social skills and for people to work together, because if you don't work together in this game, you will not complete your objectives and your quests.
Well, I'm sure that there are simulations that do work.
The point I'm trying to make is I don't think it's necessarily up to just the educators to instill these social skills through technology.
The companies that hire our students and pay them, it is up to them to determine what they get for the money they're paying for salaries. So I think the challenge, the world she's talking about are, in fact, you all have to go see this video from South Park and World of Warcraft. It's absolutely hilarious. But there's some scenes that they've taken out where these cartoon characters are playing, but the way they're talking is exactly like you would in the military if you were going out in a squad formation to do a raid or to do a scouting patrol. It's phenomenal. And I saw it, and the thing is funny, it's a comedy, but the way they were talking, it's like, okay, take the right flank, launch your whatever, hit for a 10-point perimeter, da-da-da, and it was right out of the military. And you know, the U.S. Army has got now these big gaming sites to train for squad tactics and so on. This is the future, I'm convinced of it. Even though I didn't buy into it, this is going to take us somewhere. But it doesn't address the issue we're coming back to, is where's the pain if you're doing that? Because I have students who can't spell. I don't think that having 15 instant messenger windows, certainly my experience is that you are scatterbrained. You may be multitasking, but you're not really tasking very well on anything. And the studies of the brain that I've heard about say that your brain is actually switching. It's not multitasking. It's turning one process off and turning the other one on. So great for gaming with the other friends, but will it help you when you're in a stiflingly, boringly conference room without your Mountain Dew and your seat's uncomfortable and the boss wants you to look professional with your tie on? Well, and that's where some of the pain comes in.
Part of the issue could be what I was reading the other day, a piece from Alfred Lord North Whitehead, whatever, described as inert knowledge, which is, yeah, folks may be doing all, for example, all this economic stuff, working together and doing all that stuff in that environment, but they're so totally unaware of what they're doing and they don't have any transferability. So you put them in a slightly different environment and they don't see that those skills transfer.
But I mean, as a child growing up and your mother and your father are teaching you to say please and thank you, or hold the door for someone who's a little bit older than you. Whenever you're older and you just do those things, are you consciously sitting there saying, oh, okay, well, I learned this to do this? I think
that's not inert. That's where you've applied it to then generalize.
No, but you can apply it in the virtual world if the world is realistic enough, and that's pending.
Well, but the question is, can they generalize from the virtual world to the real?
And he's not social.
No, it doesn't help at all. That's bogus to say it.
Just like in that.
Well, but see, here's the thing. For some people, it's a clear. If you're wheelchair bound, if you have Tourette's, there are lots of places where it is really applicable. But it's easy to get sucked in. Just like I used to watch 4 hours of TV every single day. Now here's the problem, and I want to use this as a segue to jump a little more to technology, because I want to at least touch base on some of the things I mentioned here. When he showed, Martin Bean used to work. He was the owner and the founder of, what was it? One of the big tech train companies. I can't remember what it was. And that's the third or fourth time I've seen him speak. What was kind of sad for me is now that he's part of Microsoft, the flavor of his presentation changed from being this kind of entertaining, funny technology after dinner thing to being more of a sales pitch. So he was giving a big pie chart with all of those. I mean, that's way too much crap on that thing. I'm taping, right? So normally it would be more entertaining and more inspirational, but he had to do the pitch. You know that device they were all carrying around? That's crap. Yeah. It's crap because its design is crap. It's way too big for what it's proposing. It has them using phones, and why would you have two of them? That's why I stopped using a PDA, because I have a phone. And to finish it off, aside from the battery thing he's talking about, why the hell would you go out in the beautiful woods and then listen to rock music or whatever? I mean, that's just, no offense, but there's a time when we have to live life and there's a time when we have to do these things. They are converging. This is a great example. I can do fantastic pictures with this. It's the size of a cigarette lighter. It's going to get smaller, but this will include my phone. And then I can share pictures like it was shown, but not to the detriment of my life. It enhances it by, look at that cool sunrise. It's about the sunrise. It's not about the device. And they were making it seem like the device is this be-all, and it's not even very usable. I guarantee. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, it was just this thing about focus and about having all these windows open and the scatter thing. It's just to share. This is a quotation from the writings of the Baha'i faith. So long as the thoughts of an individual are scattered, he will achieve no results. But if his thinking be concentrated on a single point, wonderful will be the fruits thereof. And I think we are missing something, because all this stuff that's going on, what is it actually, what actually comes out of it? Because I think if you look at the history of civilization and the problems in the world, if we really want to solve things, actually what we need is focus. What we don't need is 300 windows open.
And it's brilliant to me that you're doing that on your PDA. Yeah. Have you, and any of you been to, it's not Inspiration. There's a great site that gives out these kind of quotes, and I think that's brilliant. And it brings up a point Bill Gates said. They wanted to have this $100 laptop conference, and he said, why are we worried about giving poor people laptops when 1 billion people live in poverty? And people got upset, because you go to a technology conference not to hear about starving Africans. Imagine downstairs if they had like a UNICEF booth. Come on, we're educators, so on and so forth. But the reality is we can get sucked into Second Life, and we can get sucked into conferences and Camtasia and all of this, and there are people dying every day. So there's a challenge. So again, I want to bring it now down to, you all have heard the terms nanotechnology, right? Nanotechnology is these super micro things that can go in your bloodstream and who knows what. But I want you to think for a moment about microtechnology, which means just really small things. We've all seen it. Who here is familiar with Moore's Law? Okay, a couple of you. I was disturbed in one of my sessions earlier. I mentioned Moore's Law and one person had heard of it. So Moore's Law, and correct me if I'm misquoting it, Gordon Moore, founder of Intel, said that the processing power of the chipset, or whatever it was, will double every 18 months. And later he revised it to be 24 months. Which means, in theory, everything will either get twice as fast or half as expensive. Obviously, there are market factors and distribution channels and things to consider, but if you all look at your thumb drives, remember the first one you ever had? 32 megs, 16 megs, it was like $79 for 16 megs, but it was cool. Now, I look at the adverts every Sunday to get my fix, right? Get that shopping instinct out of me without leaving my kitchen. And I'm waiting for 4 gigs to get below 50. 4 gigs is currently 99. 2 gigs is under 50, right? So I want you to project for a moment. Here's my 2 things. I've become addicted to this camera. It's $200 at Sam's Club. And this is Sony WC50. This doesn't have a camera. But the day that this camera has the features, that this phone has the features of that camera, I'm not going to have the camera. Now, you've been to a place where an engineer comes into the room and he shoots an infrared detector in the corners, and he can measure the temperature throughout this room. He can also measure the distance. Well, hell, why not we build that onto here? Okay, what about GPS? It's already there, we just don't have the interface to it. Why don't we have GPS in the pictures? What kind of picture does a camera usually take? Digital? What's the data format? Well, no, this is a 6.0, but normally you want your picture to end up as a JPEG, right, with various levels of compression. Well, JPEG has data attached to it called EXIF data, and it's a big table of fields: aperture setting, light, resolution, all these things, and most of them are empty because the cameras don't yet fill them. But now imagine you have a GPS. There's a field for latitude and longitude and altitude and direction and speed and all those things, but none of the cameras use them yet. So the GPS will talk to the photo, and it will encode that information on the image. And it will encode that information on each frame of your video. So as I'm walking around taking video, it will be geotagged. So you can then overlay that video onto a map, and then have pictures associated with the map. And if we overlay all of your videos onto one map, we have 20 different views of one location from different angles at different speeds at different times of the day. So our view of the world, we will soon have a digital representation of the whole world, life-size. You will be able to scan and see any part of the world that's ever been photographed by anybody. And Flickr gives rise to that, and wiki sharing, and wiki
for the White
comments.
House and federal government installations.
Well, that's the beauty of it. See, now, this is where it gets scary. Did any of you see Aeon Flux? Sort of a futuristic movie. The woman is going into the bowels of the beast to kill somebody, and she drops these ball bearings behind her. And the ball bearings drip down like liquid until they're flat and flush with the surface they're on. Later, when she's in prison, she whistles, and these ball bearings turn back into ball bearings, and they roll towards her, and they all stick to the wall, and then they explode, blowing a hole in the wall. Now, this is funny, but there's a website now. You've been to Google Video and YouTube. There's a man, and he writes, he's from Canada, and he writes A Dream Come True. And he has a 5-minute video of a $189 remote control airplane, and he has mounted on it a 1-ounce color camcorder that has a remote signal, and it's on a tilt swivel base with a motor. And he put on headgear, the VR helmet, with a gyroscope that sends a signal to the camera. And the man is flying around and filming, looking over the wing like this, but it's a remote control plane. All for a total of under $1,000. You can, off the shelf, buy a $4,000 helicopter with a video camera attached to it and take film of anything in the city you want until somebody throws a rock at it. Now that's today. Project a week into the future, a year into the future, 10 years in the future, that thing will be something you buy at Toys R Us. It'll be this big. It'll be a little air-controlled thing, and you can send it anywhere. You can send it into public restrooms. You can send it into bedrooms. You can send it into the principal's office. You can do whatever you want, and nothing will be secret if anyone really has a mind to find it out. And to give you an example of that, any of you have a Sprint phone? Well, I'm sure you know how these phones work, but if you put the headset in, it defaults to auto answer. So when you're driving down the road, it picks up for you, and you don't even have to hit OK. It rings once, and now they're hearing you. Put it in an office. Turn the ringer off. Set it to auto answer. tape it onto the desk. Now you call that phone from somewhere else and you hear everything in that room. Off the shelf, right? Well, they're all like that because
You can use it to detonate roadside bombs.
and they do. So what I want you to think about is, as every device that you can think of right now will soon fit into this package, and by soon I mean in our lifetimes. Every device that you can carry in your hand will fit into a package like this or smaller. We won't have glasses. I'm going to go get laser surgery very soon because I'm fed up. In the future, people just won't do glasses except to be like clever or look intellectual. But the beam can be sent on your retina, so you won't have the panel here. You will have the thing that just sends the signal there, and so you can be surfing the web right now while you're pretending to look interested, right? And you'll have a little thing in your hand that maybe it's a keyboard where you're not doing keys, but there's a set of 3D signals like the way we do sign language. You know, you draw, you stretch, you click. It's going to be a whole other language. I'm not sure if kids will be learning to touch type early on or whether it all goes to be voice recognition. So tell me what happens when we have these machines, because they're coming. The reason I tie this is because we're in education. And so this now, I can, with this camera and a $25 tripod, forget Camtasia and Captivate and all these expensive tools and streaming video. Off the shelf, I can now record my lectures and put them on YouTube that day. It ain't pretty with all the ads, but I don't have to fight my institution to do it. And it's going to get cheaper.
Technology is there, but we are lacking behind learning the technology.
Right, you agree that the kids will know it? Your kids will know it.
How do they know it?
They play around with it. If I give you this phone, you've never seen it before, how do you learn to use it? You don't have a manual. How do you learn? My father reads the manual. My friend, he says, I explore every menu option, starting from the top.
To introduce a little darker...
Next generation will be able to kind of use this technology.
And it can be very dark. I'll give you that.
To introduce a little darker perspective, though, is there's two books I would strongly urge everybody to read because I think they have immense implications for education. They're both by Larry Lessig, who helped found Creative Commons. One is called Code, C-O-D-E. The other is The Future of Ideas. And there's an issue here of who owns this whole false concept of intellectual property. The idea that people can own ideas. I should rather say that some legally sanctioned corporation can own ideas. And what's happening is that's going to govern a whole lot of this stuff. You talk about, yes, you can create the video and you can put it up on YouTube. Not for much longer. Because YouTube being bought by Google, they just signed an agreement with the Hollywood studios. Everything that's going to get uploaded to YouTube is going to get screened according to the Hollywood studios RIAA criteria, and RIAA is now going to be the judge as to whether or not that piece is their property and their copyright, and if so, it ain't going up there. And they just took down 30,000 pieces, 30,000
But
files
that's fine with South Park, but with this, that has nothing to do with it. We're educators. We're not worried about Hollywood video in our classroom.
No, the point is, YouTube signed the deal. You upload that, it has to get screened, and it's not a question of whether you originated it or not. It's a question of whether RIAA thinks they want that up there or not. I mean, let's face it, these are the same folks that have been going around suing dead people for file sharing on music.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. So the dark side is the control, the big brother.
The dark side is the control there.
Because I tell you, if Google...
And I see the same stuff here going on, for example, at this conference. Look at your own publishers of textbooks. Yeah, they provide all those nice little ancillaries, but don't you dare screw around with them. No matter how much you modify them. I went to some of the stuff about the open educational resources and the repositories like Merlot and Sophia and a bunch of stuff like that, and they all like to use the word open, but I wish they would go to the Electronic Freedom Foundation and learn what the word open really means, because what they're offering is just free as in beer, not free as in freedom, and it's not open. If you can't edit that stuff,
right. So it's like the Sophia Project and the other open consortium. So we've got only about 7 minutes, and so I want to plant a couple seeds in your mind. I had notes that basically said, you know, look at hardware and software. Who's familiar with the term Web 2.0? So that's something that's happening, but we don't quite know what it means. You know, there have been definitions put out there, but really think of the web as becoming another client app that works as richly as client apps. And you have some interesting things happen. The hardware gets better and faster and better and faster at the same tune that this stuff does. So really the integration, like that video we saw again of that device is now old school. It's a dinosaur already. They just don't know it. They're going to waste billions of dollars trying to make it work, and then there'll be something that does work in a couple of years later. These laptops, you already feel the weight. You know, this is a 3 or 4 year old technology, and the Windows interface is 20 years old. It was Hewlett-Packard, and then it was a Mac, and now and nothing's changed. It's still boxes on boxes, which is why I'm so excited about the virtual worlds. So, if you haven't, you're all familiar with Wikipedia. I'm convinced that Jimmy Wales' mission, he's the founder of Wikimedia, is to bring all of human knowledge to all of mankind. That's a pretty tall order, but he's got 1.2 million articles, and they're good articles, no matter what people say, they're good stuff. And so now extend that to Wiki Commons. Every picture I take, if I say I contribute this to the public domain, and everything done by the government, the federal government, is already public domain. Every botanist that's on a federal dollar has to make those pictures in the public domain. We have an incredible wealth of material, and soon it will be videos. People like us who are contributing and throwing them up there. Maybe it's a soundbite. Maybe it's reading a quote from the Baha'i faith, the Jewish faith, or the Islamic faith. Maybe it's somebody showing how to juggle. What's going to happen is all those vendors down there they're in a very weird situation because their model is going to go away. Right. They just haven't figured out what to do about it, and they've still got another good 5-10 year run with it. But there will be no place for the intellectual property of content. There will be open source test banks where you want a Java question, there's 5,000 to pick from. Why would I care about your cartridge? But I don't know where it's going to take us. If you get time, I'd like you to watch a video, Epic 2014. Have any of you seen that? Epic 2014 is a hypothetical news report about the past of media conglomeration, but it's written in 2014. So it starts out by documenting what's happened with Google and Yahoo and Amazon starting in maybe 1998. It says Google merges with Amazon using the custom Amazon friend referral system with the unparalleled search engine and creates Googlezon. So Googlezon comes about in about 2006. And then they do this custom thing where the news feeds from Google are already cyber generated. They're robotic news feeds. There's not a person that's writing them. And then you mix that with Googlezon, and you now have whatever you're interested in, you can send to me. And so we have these homogenous groups of people who are all interested in reading the same thing. So it's an unparalleled wealth of knowledge, but the majority of people are not using it for any good, and they're not looking at what really matters. And so the New York Times sues them, they lose the lawsuit, and the last sentence of this video is quite telling, and it says, in feeble protest, the New York Times takes its print completely offline and becomes a publication catering to the elderly and the elite. Right? And I'm not quoting exactly, but it sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Right? So this is a very powerful video, and it starts talking about the media. So the media can go two different ways. We see the conglomeration, ABC, Fox, Rupert Murdoch, that whole thing, and we see the downsides of that, but it's being counteracted by Wikipedia, by RSS feeds, by Man in the Street. To me, it's fantastic that you could take this to southern Lebanon and get pictures of what cluster bombs are doing to kids, even though BBC or Fox News is too scared to send a reporter there. And then they can upload it. So we will be able to see every corner, every part of Darfur, every part of North Korea, because you'll be able to fit it in your lapel. What do we do with it is another story, and what that video suggests is that the masses, and you can see this when you go to the airport and you look at the magazines, the masses of people are interested in total bunk. It's who slept with who and who had whose baby. I know more about Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston than I ever cared to know from reading the covers in the airport. Wandering by, just oh, what's she doing now? But there's one Economist and one Time and one Newsweek, and that's it. Cigar aficionado, small airplane, guns and ammo, it's all crap. So we now have the potential to have a whole lot more crap that's customized to our crap needs, or we can have quality. So I predict it'll be the 1% that really goes and finds the good stuff, and the rest is just fluff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. Let's go back to, there's a stratification in here. There is going to be, I think, a few people that are going to be able to manage all this. And some of our students will do some. Maybe we aren't. I think that's the challenge, is that biologically, we're we're about the same we were 100,000 years ago. Our capacity to process has not, as far as I can tell, measurably changed. Yet these tools that are around us are kind of challenging that, so that you're not multitasking, you're switching on and off.
Right.
So perhaps we're kind of like a lot of our students, us, myself included sometimes, we're like a stone skipping across the top of the water. I'm having difficulty managing in an effective way for that deeper kind of focus, which I feel is important if I'm going to be a player. Students probably speak with this term in the next 5 years.
So we have less than a minute left, so let me leave with a negative and a positive. The negative is, I'm kind of a liberal. I grew up on a hippie commune. I'm interested in world affairs. And I think the 4 books that everybody needs to read is 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Animal Farm, and what's the other one? Brave New World. I mean, these were classics from my growing up high school in the 80s, right? I took a survey of about 5 teenagers who were in my house the other day, and none of them had read more than one of them. And that was 2 of them had read one of them. Now I can understand The Old Man and the Sea because it's short. Everyone does a book report on that. But not having read those in this day and age, just because communism is not a threat anymore, is terrifying to me. Right. So that's the grim side. And if we can't figure out, if they say, oh, well, it's a soundbite generation, novels are not sound bites. You have to sit down and read, even if it's an e-text. You can't read it sentences at a time. The optimism, however, comes from the fact that we reach a point in our lives where we say, you know, maybe I like to smell the flowers. Maybe I like to work in the soup kitchen. And these technologies will enable that more than ever before, and enable us to be closer to Darfur and closer to China, and maybe help them in ways so that that 1% that cares can actually do something about it. So that's what I've got. And I've gone around in circles. I wish there were a way to kind of congeal this, but it never ends.
Well, that's a metaphor for exactly what's happening. Various people are trying to congeal this into something they can sell, typically, downstairs. In a sense, as educators, we're trying to make some sense of it, congeal it so that we can offer it in some meaningful way, or manage it so that the students we can tap into this energy that students seem to have.
Right.
But I think that's proving to be quite a challenge.
It's easier for you to use the technology because, you know, my son's generation, they love the kind of like web, you know, they love this stuff. If I want to make sure my student knows TI-84 or TI-85, 86 graphing calculator, it's so boring to them. It's just a technology to, you know, based on math. I'm just like trying to teach them, okay, this is how you do matrices. You just have to do boring. And it's easy for you to use technology when it comes that technology to their use, boring. So give me some ways that I can make it like kind of like...
I think if we go after the long tail, I believe that most knowledge is little chunks. Like we all learn to tie your shoes when you're maybe 5 or 6 years old. You didn't intellectualize it. Somebody didn't show you a learning object for how to do it. Your mom or your dad said, here, do this, and you tried it, and do this, and you did it about 13 times, and then you got it. A lot of learning is that you do not learn your times tables from games. You might reinforce them with flashcards, or you get a little Bing reward for doing it, but ultimately you have to plant it in your brain. And I think that these technologies will allow us to begin to address the long tail, because if I'm a good teacher and I've built really good course materials and good test banks and good quizzes and self-assessments and FAQs, ultimately my class can run itself in some disciplines. Not maybe a rhetoric class where we need active debate, but if it's just to get you to learn such and such, that is possible. And then we get into a whole other discussion, because then you can have one teacher teach 1,000 students, and what teacher wants to be out of a job for that? But I would love to have some more time on my hands to do the stuff I really love to do and not be dealing with the same questions semester after semester. So this Web 2.0 and the convergence of these tools, imagine you have a wiki FAQ that every student contributes to for 5 years at your school for every class. Most questions will have been answered, and they can be answered by a robot without taking away from the student experience. But the robot has to be good enough that it's not off-putting.
That level of discernment is still something that probably has to come from some maturity that you've developed, and through taking some of those steps that we all went through. I mean, there's only so much we can leapfrog over.
Right, right. So I propose that there's a lot of pain in the future. It's very exciting, but nobody wants to hear that these students are not going to be Java programmers unless something changes. So they keep enrolling and they keep flunking out of the class or dropping out of the class again and again, and we keep getting FTEs from the state and they keep paying tuition and buying the books, and it continues. And at some point we may have to go back to evaluating your brain and saying, you know, I'm sorry, but unless something changes fundamentally, you're not going to be a web developer, because it's a professional discipline, and if you don't have discipline, you can't be in it.
Right.
So we can go all day. Thank you so much for coming. I wish I had cool links and things for you, but if you come back next year and we're all here, I'm predicting Second Life is going to be on your radar.
Okay.
Thank you.